Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello, and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. First off, before we get into today's episode, I want to thank all of you who have reached out to support me along my journey as a special needs mom, as it's been one of those thick seasons as my son has undergone at the point that you're going to listen to this episode, his second brain surgery. And you'll have to go check out what's going on over on Instagram if you want more updates than that. But for now, I will thank you in advance for all the love and support. I feel it, and it means so much to me and my family. This week's episode was, it was a fun conversation with my guest, Nicole Holcomb. And she is also known as Dyslexia Mom Life. She's an author, a creator. She also has a podcast. You're going to want to check it out. Whether or not your child has dyslexia, I have a hard time saying that word. You'll hear it in the episode too. You're going to want to check her out. She just puts together a really helpful podcast. And so I know I have enjoyed it, and I think you will too. So all the easy ways to find her will be in the show notes of this episode. And of course, share her with your community so that maybe people that are early in the stages of a new diagnosis, especially if it is dyslexia, that they can find her and essentially be supported in the early days. I think a lot of us that are maybe a few years further along in the journey would just, oh my gosh, if we had what I see available now, back then, I would have jumped on that. That would have been amazing. But we are where we are at now. And so what we can do is help along another mom, as I think that is the gift of being woman, is having that desire to nurture, to take care of, and to come alongside other people, especially as mamas. This episode is full of just conversation. Actually, what you're going to have to forgive me because we literally jumped right into conversation that I didn't even have time to formally introduce Nicole. And so you're going to be like, well, that was a little rough. Well, it was, because I had to kind of stitch together a few things because we were so excited to connect that I forgot about being a proper podcaster for a second. But you're going to get to hear about a conversation, a word that she brought up called invisible parenting. And I think it puts words to, what a lot of us experience that has us feel so alone and unseen and ununderstood. So pay attention. You're going to really, I think, love putting some words to that feeling and that experience. I think she also has a lot of wisdom about mom's belief of possibility, both for themselves and for their child, and holding space for that. So this episode, like most of my interviews, is a little longer. However, I think it's also good. I think it's also great just to be together, grab coffee, maybe while you're driving, maybe listen to it in a couple different pieces. But the whole episode is filled with juicy goodness. So stick around till the end. And you know what? Now that I realize that I have not asked for a long while, if you wouldn't mind taking a hot second to go rate and review this podcast. I know there's a lot of different players out there. Not everybody is on Apple anymore. So your player may or may not have the ability to do that, to take a second to rate or review. The other thing that you might consider, and that would mean the world to me, is if you would share this podcast with other special needs moms. Maybe you think of a specific person and you can just send it to her, whatever way is easiest for you, or maybe consider sharing it on social media so that the people that are in your circle can hopefully get as much out of it as other moms have shared with me that they do. Now with that behind us, let's get into the episode. Here is Nicole Holcomb. Hi, Nicole. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I know it took us a minute to connect. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to our conversation today.
Let's get right into it.
Yeah. One of the things, when I started the podcast was because I am a former educator, I love to teach and to lead. But the other piece of it was from the very beginning, I'm like, this whole momhood thing, it is a challenge, just to be a mom. And I can remember early on talking to a girl at work who had grown daughters. And she's like, yeah, people don't talk about things like this, just random questions I'd ask about parenthood. And I thought, it's more than just the journey of dyslexia. It's her journey. It's my journey. It's how can I go along beside this person where I'm a little bit ahead perhaps of them to help them and help her really figure out what is this whole parenting thing. And yes, there's an element of dyslexia. It is a big driver in what we do and how we show up. But it's also the self-care that we don't do. It's also, just putting those relationships in the front of everything that we do. And so I have to remind myself of that. I'm not an expert, but I have a little experience, but I try to remind myself that, if we don't get the homework done tonight or we get stuck somewhere, it's not the end of the world. The relationship I'm building with her, that's the end of the world. That's what she's going to remember when she's an adult and hopefully thriving with her own kids. So it's really beyond just being a podcast or a website where you can go and get information of my child can't read, so are they dyslexic? It's also tips on, book recommendations or guests I brought in to talk about how can I thrive as a mom. So yeah, it's definitely a kind of a bigger picture. It's a lot to take in, but I try to do, try to be that positive spot. There's just so much negativity in the world and in social media right now. I wanted to have a spot where she can come and laugh, where we can collaborate and talk. And I'm so excited about, meeting you through a mutual group that we're in and connecting, because this is what it's about. It's making those connections and really just being there for one another.
I couldn't say that better. The connection and being there for one another. I know you have the kind of latest update on our personal family life, but we're at the point in our journey where we have chapter 2 happening, in the sense of my son has another brain tumor. And so we're kind of like starting over again, and in the sense of like really kind of in a place where it was familiar 10 years ago, where we are so focused on his care, and then just
Right.
kind of managing the life disruption and the surprises and the all of the things that go with a diagnosis like a brain tumor, the like physical part of it, the mental part of it, and emotional, spiritual, all the financial. Oh my gosh. So
Right.
um but what you mentioned about the community, about that, and I think what's been really really like amazing this time around is the community that I've created over the last 10 years, even so as through a group that I'm in, a different group. That actually, now that I'm realizing, I'm like, we got to get you in that group too. But
Yeah.
a disability mom podcast group.
Oh,
And
great. Yeah.
yeah, and so where was I going with that? Yeah. So anyhow, one of the women, Katie Taylor, who I met through that, her podcast is Child Life Live. Child Life. I'll put it in the show notes. It's a cute name. Maybe it's Child Life on Demand. Anyhow, she's a child life specialist, has a podcast, just as an amazing person. And I wanted a child life specialist to support my son in advance of his surgery. And it was easier to ask her about it than it is to contact our hospital at this time.
Right.
And so, like, she put out her feelers, she connected us with something. She messages me last night saying, I have somebody ready. Can I give them some information so they can contact you? And yes, of course. So I'm just like blown away that like I basically have a back channel, like a underground army, if you will, that is
Right.
developed from
Mm-hmm.
kind of being in this community for so long.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure too, even though that you've gone down this road before, I'm sure it looks totally different 10 years later, as you know, you as your family unit, your child, all of y'all have grown and changed, not to mention medical advancements and
Yeah.
just everything. So I imagine it's almost like a new again, like you said. It's almost like, okay, we've been through this, but this is going to look a little different, and navigating that may look a little different. And like you said, it's very humbling when we realize that we serve, but there's also people in our communities that care about us and want us to
Yes.
be thriving and healthy, and that care about us and our family. And that's something that is not something you think about when you set out to do the work that we're doing. And it's very humbling, but it's also very comforting to know we are not alone either, right? Like that's just an amazing benefit of having a podcast and having a tribe and a community with us.
Yeah. And so I think, yeah, no, you said it so well. Again, the idea of not feeling alone in this has been, well, I think it's twofold. One, I truly think that I am surrounded by so many people, but also I think that I have tuned my ears to hear and my eyes to see the messages of, we got you, you're not alone. I should do a whole episode. Actually, I'm going to do a whole episode on this because I think the narrative, and I want to know if this is the same for you as a mom of a child that has dyslexia, that the conversation is nobody gets it, nobody understands. And then the result is I feel isolated and alone, disconnected, all those things.
Yeah.
And I certainly can understand that. I mean, I certainly have had that experience as well. But I think if that is the story we continue to tell ourselves, then we will continue to feel isolated and alone and like nobody understands.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's more options for us as special needs moms. But I think because I've been thinking about this a lot, I think I have especially noticed how many people have said, I've got you. And here's what's interesting. Even though, like, I almost feel like I could say hundreds at this point have, maybe it's not hundreds, but it feels like that many people have said, we've got you. You're not alone. That yet still last week, I had days where I felt so alone. I felt like in my office, I was trying to do a bunch of things. And in that moment, nobody was there. And so I had those thoughts and feelings, right? And so I think it's just something to pay attention to is that part of it. And there was another piece that you said that I wanted to kind of mention, but I can't remember it right now.
Yes, I think too, what you were just saying too is, some of the work that I think is essential probably for both of us and even with ourselves is that mindset piece, because that mindset piece is huge, like you were just saying. And then the other piece of that is not only that mindset piece, but also, okay, I did the same thing. I forgot my second thing. We're rubbing off on each other already. But
we're so excited.
I know, right? Just working through that mindset piece. And then the other piece I was thinking about was, I think just feeling isolated and alone for us anyway. I'm not sure about you and your community and what you're going through, but for us, a lot of times I talk to the parents I work with and on the podcast is I feel like a lot of the things we do, probably any mom probably feels this way, is we do so much invisible parenting. There are so many things we do. Like you were saying, you're sitting in your office, you're doing things. You may have been scheduling appointments. I'm not sure if it was, personal or business related.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's invisible, right? Your neighbor doesn't see it. Your sister doesn't see it. Maybe your mom doesn't see it or whomever. But there's this weight sometimes that we carry because we do have the list and we're like, okay, I've got to call and schedule that. And then I've got to do this. And really only the mom sees that. And I think that's why sometimes, at least I can speak for myself, why I think that mindset gets to a point where you have people, but at the same time you feel like, gosh, I feel like my journey's so unique. I'm just really, maybe you don't think it exactly like that, but you're like in that moment, just being human, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And I think some of those pieces is because it is so, people just don't see it. And all of us walk a little bit different path. And I know even at my daughter's school recently, we went to like a parenting lunch and chat. And I remember the founder of the school said, she had just told the new teachers, if you've met one dyslexic, congratulations, you met one dyslexic. Like, they're all different. And I think that we all are different and our journeys are different. We all parent different and our kids are different. And so although we're together, I think so we still feel somewhat isolated just because unfortunately that's how society has kind of groomed us at this point. But, I think that the more we do the work we do and the more connections, like just today, us having this connection, I know already I'm going to be sending you messages on Voxer. Like I thought about a minute ago, I was like, there's a couple of moms that I just send and say, hey, checking in with you. How are you doing? And those relationships have been everything. Sometimes I'll get a message and not even think, oh, wow, I got a message from someone in Seattle. And, it's been amazing that way. But I think you're absolutely right. I think when we're by ourselves, we get in our own way sometimes. And like you said, I think it's just that awareness that it's okay. There are going to be hard days, and it's okay if you need to sit in your closet with a box of Oreos and have a cry. That's okay. Collect yourself though and get back out there and in the fight. But it is. It's not, it's not. Yes. Yeah, it's just, yeah. And we're all in that. And that's what I want them to know. They're not alone, but we're all in the struggle. We all get it, right? We're all there.
I think that the words invisible parenting is really a good awareness piece to have, because as you're saying this, I'm thinking of the moments where I have where I'm doing the things like managing the like majorly explosive moments, and they're really hard. And I think the experience that I have is I wish someone could see this, because it's like words don't even begin, right? Mm-hmm. Or like for a mom that's like managing a major medical protocol or the, G tubes. And mm-hmm. that's not my world. So I don't even know the vernacular as much, but like all the unique experiences like we had, I think exactly like the experience I had last Monday alone in my office, scheduling appointment after appointment. And I think that knowing that nobody was there seeing and witnessing this, what happened for me is the thought of nobody else is having to do this, and that nobody, or even it would be they aren't having to do this, and it would be they as in parents that don't have children like we do. Right. And I think that, and what's interesting is kind of reflecting back even on last Monday is I think what I started to go down is the path of pity. I was kind of feeling totally sorry for myself. And I kind of actually had a moment where I knew I couldn't do much else. So I just started writing and journaling. And I got to a point where, just like where you were saying, it was like, I kind of spoke to myself. I was like, okay, get up, go schedule a workout, go sleep, go eat properly, and just kind of do the very
No Oreos in the closet?
Oh, I did that too.
Okay.
I
Eat healthy one.
but I was out in the open. I was
right.
yeah, the
I
eating one I
gotcha.
have not reined in yet.
Yeah, I understand. Completely understand
I
that.
really like Oreos. I just have to say. Okay, but before actually, because I want to step back a second because
Yeah.
we just dove right in and we are gonna keep going, but I want to step back and actually introduce people to who you are, kind of explain in a snapshot your journey as a mother, and then how you got to be a mother of a child with dyslexia, which I always think is really fun that I cannot say or spell that word. Okay, so yes, tell us a little bit about your motherhood journey so far.
Sure, absolutely. And I will tell you, I'm a talker, but I will try to keep it condensed and hopefully hit all the highlights. So I'm a mom to an amazing daughter. She is currently 10 years old and in fifth grade. But our journey started back a long time ago. I didn't realize we were on this dyslexia journey path when we were already in the car, evidently driving down the expressway. And then I was like, okay, what's going on? But even early on, just a few years old, there was signs of problems with articulation. There were words and phrases it was just difficult to understand her. And our daughter Hattie would get so frustrated because she would know they have no idea what I'm saying. And it was frustrating for us too, because how horrible does it feel not to be able to communicate with your child?
Mm-hmm.
And so at 2.5 years old, we got her into private speech, and that helped for a while. Like that really did. And we saw, this bright little girl who was, had a huge imagination, an amazing vocabulary, just really start to flourish and do well. But when we started hitting academics, when we started pre-K and kindergarten, and we started those lovely sight words and things of that nature, it was like, okay, hold on. We would sit and we would study and study and study. And it would get to Thursday night and she wouldn't remember any of those sight words. I'm like, it's the word "the." She said, "Stick? What?" I mean, it would be something completely not even related, letters not even the same. And so we kept on kindergarten, and I, reached out to our educators. We had some amazing educators that we worked with, and they said, "Oh, it'll just click. One day it'll just click. It'll be fine." Well, it didn't. It didn't. It didn't. Yeah, it'll be fine. It's gonna be good. So the sight words, did happen, and she, wasn't able to read. Her spelling was horrible. Her handwriting, it wasn't legible. You really couldn't understand what she was writing. And as she, was in kindergarten and was writing letters and identifying letters, she started those reversals. And so some letters were backwards, some numbers were backwards. And, it's ironic that I named her Hattie, and D's are a problem for dyslexics. And so bless her heart.
So sorry.
Yeah, right. I'm like, sorry about that, kiddo. So, but even so, in kindergarten, we were still being told, sometimes it's hard to know. And especially with her articulation, she's been in speech up through this year. We just recently finished up with speech at this point. That's a long window, 2.5 to 10. Like that's a long window of time. So even in kindergarten, we could understand her, but there were still struggles in the classroom to understand her at times. And I remember, and people listening that aren't as familiar with dyslexia, I thought, oh, well, if it's backwards letters and numbers, that isn't that dyslexia? I didn't realize it was a whole way your brain processes how your brain is wired. And I'm a former educator, and I did not have this on my radar, but I knew something wasn't right. And so fast forwarding into first grade is when we have her identified. They identify her in the public school as specific learning disability. But we had an OG, an Orton Gillingham tutor, and they were like, yeah, she's dyslexic. That's, the IQ is high, the language is low. Like there's just indicators here. She's definitely dyslexic. And so we started putting some things in place. We were in a really small private school. We, continued with the speech therapy. We added some reading tutoring. And I thought, okay, so we know, we got a plan. And then all the other things start happening. She starts having headaches. She starts having stomach aches. She loved school. Her teacher was amazing. And she would text me, Nicole, she's not feeling well. And so I reached out to a person here in Atlanta, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. She's like, I can tell you what's going on. You are not providing her with enough remediation. She's not getting enough. She can't decode the words. She can't read. Now she's in first grade and she has friends. And it's kind of ironic. At the time, we had her in a really small private school. It was probably, I don't know, it was less than 15 kids. And I thought, got her in private school. She's getting speech therapy. We're doing great things. What I didn't think about was she's the one kid she perceived that couldn't read in her class. And now she can't hide behind 30 other kids because they are sitting at desks with 4 or 5 kids. And so now she's really sticking out. She doesn't say this till way later in life. But at the beginning, I didn't realize that, which is probably a blessing in disguise because, hey, we might not even know she was dyslexic yet if we hadn't had that experience. Mm-hmm. But the remediation one day a week just wasn't enough. So we had to make a decision. And so we were told, she's going to need 4 or 5 days a week for a number of years to remediate her dyslexia, to help her learn to decode words so that she can read and be successful. And we realized quickly, at the time I was working for a large public school right outside of Atlanta, and we realized that the local schools didn't have the reading instruction we needed for the remediation. And we were going to have to commit to private tutoring after school for a number of days a week and speech. Now, keep in mind at this point, we're in first grade. Well, I say we because it's a family thing, right? We are all in first grade. And look at her and I think, I just tears, right? I think, how in the world can I have her, not have a kid's life? I want her to be able to enjoy and be a kid. And so we actually got invited to a dyslexia school up in Atlanta. It's like what is dyslexia meeting or something. And so we went. And it's kind of funny because later she tells our OG tutor, my parents went to a parenting class. And she's like, it's okay. I sent them and it's okay. At that point, I don't think she knew she was dyslexic. And so it was kind of funny. It was a little family joke. But
Mom and dad are getting tutoring.
That's right. And the tutor was like, yeah, I've been to those two. It's okay. Mom and dad's okay. But she thought it was funny. She's like, my parents went to a parenting class. But, who knows? We probably needed more of those. But we found this amazing school and we started looking at schools. We are blessed in Atlanta. There are a number of private dyslexia schools. They call them immersion schools where every child's dyslexic. The whole day is this immersive program of Orton Gillingham. It's the way that the instruction is, set up to benefit a child with dyslexia and to really nurture their gifts, help them become little advocates for themselves. It's an amazing opportunity, but they're expensive.
Yeah.
And so we found one that we felt like was a good fit transition from where she was. It was a smaller school. There was chapel. There were some things that she had from her previous school, and it just felt warm and inviting. So we sold our house and we moved 60 miles across Atlanta. And I eventually in the first year ended up changing my job because I'm driving 3 hours round trip every day to get to my job. The first year's rough. It's rough. It's rough. Luckily, my mom lives with us. She was able to help with Hattie and pick her up and take her to school. But, we really did completely change our lives to provide her that opportunity. And I never will forget, in May of that first grade year, we decided to move her. Her school was very supportive. And I never will forget sitting in her classroom, and I was there for Mother's Day, a Mother's Day event. And I look around and I see these amazing, the kids always write something sweet. How old is your mom? What is her color hair? But this year they were writing sentences about their mothers. And I looked around and I saw these amazing sentences these kids had written in first grade. And then I looked down and I couldn't read hers at all. Mm-hmm. And I asked her, trying to play it cool. I said, so Hattie, can you read this to Mom? And she looked up at me and she had no idea. It had obviously been a couple of days since they'd done the assignment. She had no idea. She could not read the words she had written. And I never will forget, very, very supportive teacher still to this day. And she's just has a special place in our heart. And I looked at her and she's like, you see, she's like, and I remember her pulling me off to the side later and saying, we've done all we can do here for her. And she was in tears.
Wait. Let me make sure I get that. So the teacher was kind of looking at you and almost like being like saying, this is too much.
Yeah.
Wow.
And saying you're doing the right thing. Like she verbally said, you've made the right choice. We've done all we can do here. Like they were trying to help her in the classroom, but at the time I didn't realize there's severities of dyslexia. And so evidently wherever she falls in the spectrum of that is not enough to just not mark off her spelling, right? Like she needed very specific instruction to teach her how to decode words. And she was in tears and she said, I just feel so blessed that you're getting her what she needs. Like, I know she's going to do well. And, we cried.
Yeah.
But I knew at that point, you're making the right decision. This is going to be a huge decision for my daughter. She'd always been in this school since pre-K 3, and now she's in first grade. And, but she's such a caring kid. She even said at the very beginning, I know you and Dad are going to do what's best for me, and she really trusted us to do that.
So wait, let me make sure. So the Mother's Day experience was at the old school before you moved, before you.
Correct.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking for a second it was at the new one. I was like, oh my gosh, like they said no.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No.
See.
So yeah, we had made the decision to move her, but finished out the first grade year. And at that end, that was like one of the last times I was in the building. And it really, I guess, seeing her with her peer group, she's an only child. She's my only child. So I don't have a comparison. And which is ironic because I taught elementary ed for a minute and then I was a school counselor for many years. But when it's your own child, it's so different. Yeah. And so I was really able to see, and she had a best friend that was reading chapter books. And, it was just, I guess it was kind of an aha moment to be like, yeah, this is not the best environment for her, which we already knew. She wasn't feeling well at school. We were having to adjust some things in that spring semester to make things a little bit more tangible for her. And, maybe the homework was pared down. I mean, they did a lot of stuff with us. But I think back now, knowing what I know now, and I can't imagine sitting in that classroom all day long and you can't spell and you can't read and your friends around you are, reading chapter books and they're writing these beautiful sentences that I saw in May. And it's interesting because now that she's in 5th grade, every once in a while she'll say something about that year. Like she'll mention things about kindergarten and first grade that she remembers, and her perspective of those things is quite eye-opening. We're just blessed that we have a child that has amazing empathy for others, has a huge heart, has a huge vocabulary, who, I don't know, she's just so gifted in so many other ways and so ahead of her time in so many ways. But the reading and the writing, we now know she's dysgraphic, but it's just, it's hard, and we've been in our school now 4 years. She's been in this school that she's in now. And she's made some amazing accomplishments, but we still struggle. There's still anxiety. There's still, we're lucky enough, math and science, she's like a little math whiz. So we're lucky in that regard. But the other things, the dysgraphia with the writing, and part of that is also.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I don't think everybody will be familiar. I know that I'm not super familiar with what dysgraphia is. I've heard the word, but do you mind just kind of sharing what that is?
I will do my best. Yeah. So my understanding about dysgraphia, it's kind of like the backwards letters, which you always thought. I thought was more of a writing. But the more I've gotten into the research and really just kind of figuring out her learning profile, the dysgraphia piece is also not just how their writing looks. Is it sloppy? Do they space it out? Because now her writing looks amazing. I can read it. But it's the process of her brain has to remember those letters and how they're formed and what do they look like. And then it has to communicate with her hand. So it's not all hand coordination, although some of that could be. It's also her brain processing all that information to then help her write that sentence. So a lot of it is the processing piece and the processing speed. Her processing speed, it's funny because she'll say now, is this why I'm the last one to finish in class? I'm like, yeah, but when you finish your math, you get 100. So I'm okay with that. Take all the time you need. But I can remember even back in pre-K 3, like she'd be the last one to finish a coloring sheet. And I mean, at the time, I didn't know that that's what it was, right? But looking back now, I'm like, oh, there were some signs. There were some signs, and we missed them because we didn't know to watch for them. But even like the other day, she had a little project at school where she had to write a paragraph from a chapter they were reading in class. Her teacher, I want to share this because her teacher did something that I thought, this is really smart. And it's something a parent could do at home with children that are struggling to read and write, which was she had to write a paragraph to summarize a chapter. And what her teacher had done for them is she gave them 3 sticky notes in class. And she told them, this is kind of the beginning of the story. And so they all wrote out the same sentence. You could do this at home, though. You could modify this. So they wrote out 3 separate sentences, 1 sentence on each sticky note, if that makes sense. And then I looked and I was like, why is there a B on this one and an E on this one and an M on this one? And why are those letters circled? Like, I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And she said, Mom, it's the beginning, middle, and end. So she was able to take her sticky notes, lay them on the table. Now she has her paragraph. So now she just has to concentrate on rewriting those sentences into her paragraph. It was like, oh my goodness, that's like a nugget of gold. I thought, how cool is that?
I know. I think a lot of us could all use that when we're trying to write and articulate our minds and our thoughts.
Right. And even helping kids with homework, if you need to help with homework, letting them dictate to you and writing out those separate sentences, letting them then organize them and then rewrite them, because it takes some of that element of recall out that they struggle with as dyslexics. And so, so it's, we're still on the journey, but it's that's probably not the quickest snapshot of what's going on, but
it's an interesting one.
Yeah,
and you're also so now let's kind of turn to your experience. You shared a little bit about what it was like for you to kind of have that moment in first grade where it was so clear to you that one, her needs were not being met. But also it sounds like it was a beautiful moment of validation. And I think those little moments we get sometimes that we like just feel so confident that we're doing the right thing for our child are so amazing. What has been kind of your experience as you process being a mom of a daughter who has significant struggles in the area of school, also has many gifts, but really, I know, normally we don't struggle with our child's being gifted, if you will. But what has that experience been like? And I'd love to hear a little bit about how and why you kind of made the transition to support moms like ourselves in the unique area of dyslexia.
Sure. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, and I don't think you characterize it like this, but this is just what I call it, which is along the way, I have had many pity parties with myself. And, part of that, because, we were talking earlier about the invisible parenting piece, is that, it's, from my experience, especially at the beginning, like you love your children like you can never imagine. But when you find out they're going to struggle, that they have a difference, and we're all different, right? Like we try to tell our daughter even early on, some people are good bakers and cooks, some are not. Some people, enjoy, I don't know, tennis, some don't, we all have weaknesses and we all have things we do well. And, we don't like to necessarily really highlight those weaknesses, but I try to share with her, it's okay. But I think from a mom perspective, it was hard because I kind of envisioned, I didn't have a future set out for her, but I knew that we were going to make sure she had what she needed and whatever benefits we could give to her, whether it was a small private school classroom or, a unique trip or whatever. I wanted her to have experiences that were going to benefit her and that she was going to enjoy and remember. And you start wondering, this, I guess it kind of alters the path you think you're on because you don't really think about it. You got this beautiful baby you bring home, all is good, you're rocking and rolling. And then like any parent, you have things that are difficult in parenting. But I think when, for example, we've got my niece is a year younger than my daughter, and they're both only children, and they're very close, but they live in different states. And, I think about how, she's in gifted ed and she's in a public school and her mom's a teacher and everything looks so different to her. Like I don't know, it's almost like, I don't want to say I'm resentful, but it's almost like, why does she get to be on the path that everybody thinks is normal? And why does my child have a different path? And as I think about, the school she's in is more of a transition school. Kids go to dyslexic schools for usually 2 or 3 years, sometimes a little longer. In this case, we're there a little longer. And then they transition back out. And I think about when she transitions back out, she has to say, I went to so-and-so school. You only go there if you're dyslexic. They only go to 8th grade. So if I leave her there till 8th grade and then in high school, what does that look like? So I think a lot of it is, overthinking things. That's my personality, very type A planner type of person.
I know. It's a gift and it's quite a curse sometimes, right?
It's quite a curse, especially when you're raising a child that thinks and learns differently and takes everything very literal that you say. And, what I'm learning is, and I don't know that I realized it at the time we started this journey, is parenting is a journey. Everybody's on their own journey. Some days I have to remind myself it's okay to misstep and it's okay to be human and it's okay to have a bad day. And, it's just, I don't know. I think it takes a toll when you have to go through things that are different than everybody else. And although, everybody has their own complications, even if it's anxiety or whatever it might be, everybody's challenges look different because no child is perfect. But I think when you're raising children with different needs, I don't know. It almost makes you feel like you're in a different world than everybody else. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but you just feel, and I think there's a different level of isolation that goes with that.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned it a little bit on the podcast before, so people might remember. I think it's the idea is that we all want to belong. And so we as humans are literally wired to look at people around us. And when we see sameness or when we think it's sameness, we associate like belonging. And so I think the experience, and I've talked a lot about this on just different conversations with moms, is that once we perceive, like in this case, your daughter, because she has this learning difference or this processing difference, really, that all of a sudden you think, I don't totally belong now to this entire, like even a school, right? You're at a different school.
Right.
Like, I don't belong to that anymore, right?
Yeah. We don't
so I
fit
think
here
it's
anymore.
like this experience of not belonging, but certainly not by choice, right? So it's like this victim mentality, I think, happens to us where we feel like really upset because we don't belong. And so I think what I see as kind of a pattern with a lot of the moms that have chosen to kind of go into the helping fields, and this totally, like, I think both you and I are in this camp where essentially we are recreating our belonging in the sense of like, now you have surrounded yourself with helping moms in this area that you happen to also be in, that it's like you have this, like, and back to what we were talking about earlier, like we have this community now all of a sudden, like where actually I feel like I can still go hang out with my, friends I grew up with and feel connected and belonging. But we don't talk a lot about my kid because I think they just don't know, like that's just not where I connect with them most on. But I have this whole other world that they probably don't even know exists, which is fine.
Right.
And that it's like, I guess I've always been somebody that has like multiple different kind of pockets of friends, but I think it's like my pocket of special needs moms community is getting to be so much more bigger and maybe even like more life-giving than some other communities. So thank you for sharing that.
I don't think I answered your question though about why I started the podcast.
Let's hear it.
So I initially started a blog, and I blogged actually under a different name. It was Hattie & Co. It was named after my daughter. And then I realized that, does anybody really know what that name means? And so then I rebranded Dyslexia Mom Life. So I kept writing, but like I said, I'm a type A, so it took me a while to write my blog posts and things like that. And then during that first year of her being in school up here, like I said, I commuted. It took me about an hour to get to my old job, but it took me like 2 hours to drive back through Atlanta to get to the north side. And so I could only listen to so much music and listen to so many audiobooks. So I started listening to podcasts. And for a while, I told my husband, every time we get in the car, he wanted to listen to a podcast. I'm like, people talk at me all day long. I just want to listen to some music. But during that season of life, when I was traveling 3 hours a day, I started listening to podcasts and fell in love. And at one point I had this aha moment, which was, okay, half of my population can also be dyslexic. Does she really want to sit down and read a blog post? I don't know. I would, but maybe not. Or would she rather just, throw those earbuds in her ears or earbuds or whatever and go for a walk or, do laundry or clean, do dishes, cook dinner, whatever. And she can take me along with her. And then I realized that it was a different experience. And this, it's a different experience when you're in someone's ears, they can hear you. I know I follow several podcasters. I remember one guy saying, I go to conferences and people come up to me like they know me, but because it's a different type of intimacy than just reading a written word on a page. And I wanted a different level of connection with people. And I wanted to be able to serve differently. And then I think the reason I switched over to podcasting was I realized that, am I really serving her? If my mom that I'm serving is dyslexic or is just like me and is just a busy mom in general, then it makes sense to do a podcast and then still have the written piece to support it on the website. But like I said, I wanted to also be an inspirational, a positive place to go, also getting some education along the way. But I don't know about for you, but sometimes I just have to completely take a social media detox because I get in there and then there's all this comparison that's just in your head. And so sometimes I just have to take a step back. So sometimes just listening to a podcast helps give you perspective. And so I just wanted to serve differently. But I also felt like there was a need out there because, there's different voices and different perspectives. And I feel like I have a unique perspective. And like I said, I love to serve. I love to help others. And like you probably know, as soon as someone knows that my child is dyslexic, they have questions. Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you that. And so it just makes sense for me because that's just kind of how I'm wired, is to help others. And so, yeah, I just want to be here to walk along the journey beside the moms that want to walk that journey and just give, some hope back to those who are really struggling. And like you said, it's been a unique experience. I can't tell you, it's a different level of connection to people. I get different types of emails now from my listeners that I did from people following my blog. I have people that I talk to all over, even other countries, that reach out to me, and that now I have, especially through the podcast guest, I've made relationships and connected with moms all over, and I can send them a message and ask them for something or ask them a question, or they're like, hey, Nicole, do you know where I can find this resource for somebody? It's just, I don't know. It's like you said, it's a place, you're right. It's a place where you feel like you belong somewhere. You feel validated. You feel like I can serve and I can give back. And you get something from that too. You don't always up front think about that, but you really are also serving your own intrinsic needs to belong somewhere. So that makes sense that you said that. I haven't thought about it that direction before. But yeah, I think it's all about just having a service heart and wanting to help others.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about service for a second, because clearly not everybody that listens to this podcast is going to want to be a podcaster or even be in the business of like formally helping people. Obviously, you and I have taken that route. But one of the things that I have this vision of, kind of as I continue to grow my community and coaching groups and programs that I have, is actually having an intentional service component of it. That I think sometimes when moms are in real dark places, it's the feeling that it's all one way. It's all helplessness, hopelessness, darkness. Mm-hmm. Right. And recognizing that even in those moments that she still has something to give. And not that she has to, right? Like certainly, like it's not like, oh, you have to still figure out how to give when you're in the hardest part of your life. Like that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I think that the experience for a human being to serve another human, I think connects us to the essence of who we are. And when we connect to the essence of who we are, that for us, I think, is a gift for you and it's a gift for the other person. And it dramatically shifts the experience that you're having, even in those dark moments. And interestingly now, like at the place that I'm at in my life, where it's a very potentially contradictory place where like I'm literally creating podcasts to help other women, as I also different coaching colleagues have created a Caring Bridge page because we're like in the point in the journey with Levi's Care that we're like, okay, we need all the help we can get. So it's so like funny, right, to be in both worlds. But I would say that for the moms that are kind of like, I don't have anything to give, I don't have any energy, I don't even have any like talents or insight, that I would say, BS. You have years and you have a unique journey and experience. And you're like, I'm just thinking the gift of listening to somebody. That is the biggest gift, because we as a society are really bad listeners. And I have a feeling that the special needs mom journey it builds, I think, an ability to show up a different way. So anyhow, that's a little bit of a rant that I don't know why I wanted to put that in there. But
I love that. Yeah, I love that too. Because you know why? Because one of the things I talk about too is that sure, at the very beginning, I always tell my moms that you do go through the stages of grief. You do go through all those things of denial and resentment. You just go through all the stages. But when you get on the other side of that, however long that takes, then you do have real power, because your perception and how you choose to show up, you don't have to have a platform like ours, but how you choose to show up for your child is the role model of the person they're going to become. So if we are confrontational with others, if the sky is falling, the sky is going to fall. And so, yes, there's absolutely going to be moments in time, but I also try to be very mindful about how I show up and how I am present. No, I'm not perfect, and I don't want her to think I'm perfect, but I also want her to know, my daughter to know, that we got this. And it's going to be challenging. It's not going to be an easy road. None of it's going to be. She's probably going to struggle even as an adult with things, but we're going to find pockets of interest and strengths, and we're going to nurture those. And we're going to do the things we have to do so that she does have strong self-esteem and she does have self-worth and all those things. As a mom, you are front and center of making that happen. Yeah, that's a heavy burden, but all moms have that burden. It's just we have a unique part of that, because we have to peel back those layers and help our child find those interests and find those strengths where maybe other moms don't have to do as much digging as we do. So I think, yeah, you don't have to have a platform, but you have to show up and be present in your own family, which then helps the whole community, because then you're raising kinder children, you're raising resilient children. And all that starts at home. And then you will, whether you know it or not, you will start impacting others because the way you show up. Moms will notice that on social. They'll notice that in, when we are able to go back in buildings again and actually have parent nights and things like that, or when you're having lunch, so your kid can play with someone else's, you meet at the bowling alley or whatever that looks like. You are going to have experiences with other parents. They're going to see how you show up. And so you just have to decide how you want that to be. And so in my community, they always say that you should, in business, they say, it's important to repel people as important as it is to attract people. If you're negative, I'm not a good place for you. I'm not a good space. I know we have bad days, but if you are, if you're coming to me because I'm a not special ed, but I'm a school education lawyer, I don't sue school districts. And so I will help you build better relationships with school districts, but you have to find your person. And so again, going back to what you were saying, it's all about, you start with you first, and you start with your immediate family. And whether you realize that or not, you are a leader in your community. People do see you and see how you react. And that's where, and that's 100% great and a great place to be.
Yes. I mean, I think I'm feeling so inspired over here, just so connected to kind of what I'm hopefully telling my community all the time. So my program is called Being Mom Together, for the reason that who we're being as a mom is, I think that's how what you were just saying is exactly like, yes, 100%. How we show up as a mom is not only going to give us our experience as moms, but it's kind of like I guess really could say being a role model, right? It's showing your child what's possible. And it's you also motherhood. Another thing that I love to say is motherhood is leadership.
And the hardest job you'll ever have.
Yes, it is. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Most rewarding and most challenging is what I say.
100%. You leading your daughter, as you were kind of sharing, like you're leading her is essentially showing her what's possible. It's essentially holding belief for her for what's possible before she sees it herself. And even for children that maybe are nonverbal, maybe children that may never become verbal, I think as a mom, holding the possibility that one, letting go, like the stages of grief, letting go that they were supposed to walk or talk or even breathe on their own.
Yep.
And really kind of like, it's really stepping out of the box sometimes. It's really stepping away from what we thought made a meaningful, happy life, but it's possible. And so this is the place I like to hold for moms, because sometimes you might be listening to this and being like, what are you guys talking about? And if you're there, that's totally fine. I've been there too. But no, if you think, okay, I think it can get better than this, it has to get better than this, then I think if you're curious, then follow that curiosity. Continue to kind of question where you're at, what's keeping you where you're at. And it's so much in the narrative that we're telling us, like the mindset that you're referring to earlier. I want to go back to, I knew you were an attorney, but it sounds like you work in the area of special education. Is that true?
I actually work for the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights.
Look at you. Whoa.
And so prior to that, I worked for a large metro Atlanta school district as their legal compliance officer. And then prior to that, I was a school counselor. Prior to that, I was a teacher. And having said all that, my husband's a teacher, my sister-in-law is a teacher, and we all still miss the whole boat on dyslexia. So there's that.
That's best.
But yeah, so my current job I've been in, I'm going into my third year. So when we moved to the new school, I transitioned after that first year into a new job. And so, so now I'm in a different job, but to me, it's a huge conflict of interest for me to do advocacy work, for me to talk to families about, how you file an OCR complaint or how you go after a district, because I was a district person. I get both sides of the coin. I really do. Yeah. I really think it's more about relationships and partnerships. And yeah, sure, you run across people that probably should work at Walmart and not be your teacher. I get that. But you have that everywhere you go, unfortunately, right? And so, but how you show up and how you enter the conversation can also make a difference in the relationships you have with schools and how they interact with your child. So yeah, like I said, I have a very unique perspective on things, and it's not for everybody, but I'm not an expert by any means, but I do feel like I have some unique experiences, and I get the journey part. I get I have the same challenges. It doesn't make my job parenting any easier because of my experiences I've had as an attorney or a school counselor or district administrator, and I was at a large metro Atlanta school district where my job was to respond to OCR complaints on issues very similar to this and other special education issues and other legal issues. And so, so I have a unique perspective, but that's not what I talk about on my podcast. That is not my brand, if that makes sense. Or that's not really,
it doesn't sound like it's your heart. It doesn't sound like,
that's very confrontational. I've spent a lot of time in that space, and that's where I spend my day job. But I really want to come and serve moms and be, we all have difficult things that we're doing and all have challenges in our life and our families. And, I want this to be a place that's safe, a safe community where you can come and meet other moms and have conversations and, feel a little less alone.
Yes, by all means. As we kind of wrap up, I want to make sure we tell people how to find you, how to listen to your podcast. I listened to it. It's really well done, really good. And I think it's interesting. The challenges that we have, I think, are very different than dyslexia. However, I think the experience of having the being kind of the other allows me to listen to a podcast like yours and still get a lot of it. I actually listened to another podcast called the Widowed Mom podcast. And I am not a widowed mom in any way. Husband's still very alive and very awesome. But the experiences that she has are so similar in the ways that she talks about kind of the just different challenges that come up as you have a life that very much you did not expect. And so anyhow, that is a good podcast for anyone that wants to check that as well. But I would love to hear about how to connect with you, really kind of perhaps give moms maybe that have maybe how you help people, give us a little bit more idea. Maybe people might be inclined to kind of reach out directly to you. And also I want to hear, I know that October is Dyslexia Awareness Month. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what that means to you. Kind of talk about that for a hot second.
Okay, sounds great. So really everything's under Dyslexia Mom Life. Pretty much anywhere you listen to a podcast, you can have access to the podcast. I have it on all the main directories. And then through the website is the same, Dyslexia Mom Life. I spend a good bit of time in Instagram, just kind of engaging with people. I found that I've met a lot of moms that are in similar, places in their life, made a lot of great connections. So people could always send me a direct message through IG, or, you can send me an email directly at Nicole@dyslexiamomlife.com. And then I'll send that to you so you can put that in the show notes.
I say, but if you're like me, you're going to have to Google how to spell dyslexia.
Right. Every day it's funny. I'm like, did I put the S in the right place? So yeah, it's very ironic, like you said about that. And then I also have a private Facebook group. It's Dyslexia Mom Life Podcast Community. So yeah, that's a mouthful, but it's also linked on all the podcast descriptions along with the website. So if you just go to a podcast, you'll be able to get the links to all this as well. But the great thing about that is people have to ask to be part of it. It's completely free, but there are people in there that are like-minded, that follow the podcast, that ask questions. I do have, like I was saying a few minutes ago, I do have advocates in that group. I do have attorneys in that group. I do have some connections, like you were saying earlier, connecting people to the services they need. So I recognize that there are some spaces I choose not to speak on, and that doesn't mean I don't have resources for our moms. And so I'm able to connect them that way as well. And yeah, it's Dyslexia Awareness Month. And so one of the things that we're doing this month is really trying to be as visible as possible to, connect with people like yourself, to get the word out. And I don't think we haven't talked about this, but I don't think people realize 1 in 5 are dyslexic.
I only knew that because of listening to your podcast. And I was like,
1 in 5.
That is a lot of people, actually.
Yeah. So many times people don't know, right? Like people don't know. Teachers don't always recognize the signs and the signs of dyslexia. They think they have a slow learner, or, Tim's just not paying attention. Well, he's not paying attention because he can't read what you're talking about. And so that it manifests in other ways. And so I think many times kids are misunderstood, because with dyslexia, not only are we why I keep messing this up, even with the dyslexia, we have that indivisible. Why does that sound weird? Invisible. Oh my gosh, please cut that out. Invisible parenting. But our kids are that way too. Like, you won't look at my daughter and know she's dyslexic. She looks like any other fifth grader that you walk past. But if you sit down and listen to her read, you'll know she's dyslexic, but you might not know it's dyslexia. You just know she has struggle reading. And so I think a lot of times, like I said, even in my own personal community, professional community, people don't talk about dyslexia because it sounds strange. It sounds like a disease. What in the world is dyslexia? But when you talk about we have kids everywhere that are struggling to learn to read, and they can be taught to read. People just don't know what the tools are. So there is a lot of community outreach during the month of October just to get awareness of what is dyslexia. Like, how do you boil it down? It's a struggle reading. It's a struggle writing. What does that look like? So we're spending, we're spending a lot of times talking just about what it looks like. Yeah.
Don't you have an episode on your podcast about kind of tools and resources, how to identify? I think that might be one of the episodes I listened to.
Yes. Yes.
So we'll link that one. Actually, I think that'd be really interesting. We'll link that one to my show notes, just to kind of give people a place to start. So you guys all know how to find a podcast if you're listening to this.
Right.
but however, I think that'd be a great tool, because I know even one of my best friends, her son is going into eighth grade, is in eighth grade, and wasn't diagnosed until I think over last year, so seventh grade. And she always knew he was having some challenges figuring out some things at school. It took that long to really identify, which I'm not judging it at all, but I think it's the common experience.
It is more common than our situation.
To get people the support that would be helpful to them. And even now I'm like thinking about my daughter and her processing and her speech challenges. I'm like, oh, interesting. I wonder if anyhow.
Well, especially when you hear 1 in 5, when you hear that,
yes.
when
and I have 4 kids, I'm like,
there's scientific research, and it's not, some people are like, oh, dyslexia doesn't exist. Yeah, it actually does. So I think some of it is just shifting the mindset and for people to be aware that children do struggle to read, and there is a very specific way that children can learn to decode, and they can learn the skills, because I think that's unique to other types of learning differences and learning disabilities, is that we can remediate dyslexia. We can teach her to read. She may be a slow reader. It may take her a little longer, but there are other, differences and disabilities that we can't remediate, right? Like we just can't. And so it is, to me, sort of an interesting and unique place to be. It's unfortunate, though, because for most people, even with Dyslexia Awareness Month, there are amazing campaigns going on, but it's almost like you don't get it until you're in it, right?
Yes.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. I think so many things, I found so many things like that. So many things are like that in life.
Yeah, you seek it out when you need it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, one of the other things, too, you were talking about earlier, one of the things on my website, if they go to, I think it's down kind of the middle of the first page, it says like resources on it in the middle. And I have some free resources there. But one of the things that might be good for your audience is a general like survival guide for moms. And some of it is like, I think there's 1 or 2 tips that are specific, like read 20 minutes a day with your child, things like that. Really, that's to increase vocabulary in general. Everybody should be doing that. But there's other things too, like how to build relationships with your school and things like that. So there are pieces in there. It's just kind of a survival guide for moms in general, just like a quick little like PDF that, depending, it really wouldn't matter what type of learning disability or difference your child had, you would benefit from that as a mom. So that's just another little thing that might be helpful to your audience. So
awesome. Well, again, everyone go check that out, because it sounds like, I think you guys can tell, like she's a wealth of knowledge, a beautiful heart. So Nicole, thank you so much for just this fun conversation. We like so much, it happens to me all the time where we just get so excited to talk. I don't even stop and introduce people. So, oops.
No problem. It happens.
I guess there's room for me to grow as a podcaster. Anyhow, we will see you all on the next episode. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.